Okay, tonight we're talking about emotions, and the word emotions and the word feelings are used pretty much interchangeably in our culture, but we want to make a slight differentiation between them to note that they mean very slightly different things, and the difference essentially is this. In all of the animal kingdom, and probably in the plant kingdom too, living things are capable of feeling changes in their environment. And the feelings, when they're processed by an intelligence, a consciousness, take on meaning. Emotions are feelings with meaning. It is not an emotion until you have assigned a meaning to it. It means something to you. Now that means that it has to have an interpretation. It has to have an inference of something else that's going to happen, something else that has happened. It has to be assigned an importance by an intelligence. Now what we're saying here is that emotions are different from sensory feelings, in that sensory feelings are a result of physical senses responding to the physical environment. The moment that a sensory feeling responding to the physical environment is given meaning, it goes beyond feeling into emotion. Some examples. All animals, and perhaps plants, feel hunger. They feel hunger because a physical mechanism is triggered. The second that that plant or animal also feels, besides the hunger, if there is a sense of fear, maybe my hunger won't be satisfied, that sensory feeling now has meaning. It has an inference. It has an inference which is more important than the sense itself. The fear of not being fed is a greater stimulus to the plant or the animal than its hunger, and has actually more effect on what it's going to do next than the hunger itself. The fear of not being fed is actually more powerful than the hunger which triggered it. So we're talking about meaning which can be arbitrarily assigned. It can be arbitrary or it can be assigned by a belief system. But the meaning can actually overwhelm its source. We're talking about a result which is greater than its cause. That's where we start with emotions. Emotions are a phenomena which has a result greater than its cause. It is able to obtain a result greater than its cause because there is a consciousness involved. The consciousness involved is capable of drawing deductions, conclusions, inferences, and assigning meanings. The meaning that is assigned can and often does become more important than the trigger which produced the sensation or the feeling, the sensory response in its origin.
Doesn't it even get to the point where you even forget the cause?
Oh, yes.
You get so caught up into
the meaning.
In the meaning.
And in fact, even at the original instant, when the feeling or emotion comes, your reaction to it may be stronger than the stimulus. And so you don't even know what the stimulus was. You're aware of the meaning, you're aware of your belief about it, you're aware of the fear involved, the meanings that you have assigned to it overwhelm whatever the stimulus is. And we're also not suggesting here that all emotions are sensory in origin. Some emotions rise out of a sensory stimulus, and the emotion itself is composed of a meaning which is attached to the stimulus. But emotions can be felt, experienced, and expressed even without sensory stimulus. The only thing that we need in order to have an emotion is a meaning and a willingness to respond to that meaning. It doesn't have to have a stimulus apart from our own conscious ability to process our belief system. Now, what that means is that we can have an emotion rising out of absolute nothing except for our ability to process meanings and beliefs. So we have basically two kinds of emotions. One that is a result, a response to a physical stimulus, and the other that is the result of nothing more than processing beliefs and meanings. We have given importance to ideas. The processing of those ideas can produce emotions. Then the next thing that we need to discern in is, when is an emotion emotion? When does it become emotion? We have first a belief system. In order to have an emotion about something, it has to be assigned a meaning. So what we're saying in that is that if we make an assumption about plants, for example, and this may be too much assumption to make. In our modern world, we're rethinking the way that plants think. But just for the purpose of argument for the moment, let's say that plants are not reasoning beings. Now that means they still have appetite. They have to be fed. They're capable of experiencing the need for food. Now we're not going to call that need for food hunger in plants, because in order to experience hunger, the plant needs to assign some importance or meaning to its need for food. As soon as the need for food is rationalized or thought about, it becomes hunger, appetite. Then the plant is capable of wanting. And we don't know whether plants are capable of wanting or not. So if they are not reasoning beings, and if they don't assign some fear or sense of pleasure to receiving food, then the need for food is a simple organic biochemical process, and we can't call it an emotion. More recently, plants have been hooked up to polygraph machines. And those polygraph machines have showed that plants react. They react to a person coming in the room. If there is a love bond between the person and the plant will actually put out energy when the person walks into the room. Now, there's a suggestion there of emotion, a very basic meaning attached to something that has to do with the need of the plant. Now, if that analysis of these polygraphs is correct, even the plant kingdom, which we think of probably as being the most fundamental life process on our planet, maybe other than the mineral kingdom, actually has feelings, wants, needs, perhaps even emotions. There is a physical stimulus. There is importance attached to that stimulus. There is not only life, but there is a desire to have life, to sustain life, and in the case at least of humans, there is a desire for a higher quality of life. It would appear that plants and animals are reasonably satisfied with their surroundings. They wake up, they go to hunt food, they satisfy their need, and they sleep. They don't reconstruct their environment to make it more beautiful, as far as we can tell, at least in most cases. They don't reconstruct their environment in order to make it more comfortable, except to make themselves a place to sleep. Now, what we have then in the human condition is something that would appear to be either a blessing or a curse. If we interpret it as a blessing, then what we say is the fact that we have an ability to think, to reason, the fact that we have consciousness gives us the right and the opportunity and the ability to assign extra importance to particular experiences. We can take an experience that isn't important of itself from a biological or chemical point of view, and we can make it more important. Just an example is, does she like me or doesn't she like me? Whether she likes me or not may not have any biological effect on the length of my life or even the quality of my life. It may not have any chemical effect. It may not have any physical stimulus. But if I want her to like me, then I can attach meaning to the way she looks at me, the way she responds to me, and not only the way she looks or the way she responds, but the way I interpret the way she looks and responds. I can assign meaning to certain expressions of face, to certain body movements, and in fact, it's not at all uncommon for a group of young men to sit around and interpret the way women respond in their presence. And it's certainly not uncommon for young men to see something in the movement of a woman and in his fantasy interpret that as meaning that she is attracted to him. We're capable of building the most enormous fantasies. Not only are we capable of believing that certain movements and actions mean she's attracted to me, she's got the hots for me, we also have the ability of interpreting away the fact that she is attracted. And the difference in them has to do with my belief about myself. If my belief about myself is that I don't deserve her attraction, I may overcompensate and try to convince myself that she's attracted when all evidence says that she's not. Or I may condemn myself and not believe that she's attracted when she goes so far as to say that she is. Even saying it, I won't believe it. And the difference in those, the difference in the communication in the relationship is a difference in my own belief system. Emotions, then, are the expressions of belief systems, sometimes in response to external stimuli, but not always. It doesn't require an external stimulus for us to feel something or to experience or even express an emotion. The moment that I give meaning to a belief and entertain that belief, I experience an emotion. The question is, when does an emotion become an emotion and not just a belief system? When is it triggered beyond the belief system into being an emotion? Is it when we add meaning? No. It is when we dwell on the thought. Now, we can't give a mathematical formula here that says 1 second the thought is just a thought and the next second it's just an emotion. But it is just about that fine. Let me see if I can say it this way. When the possibility of feeling hurt or jealous or angry or fearful or any other emotion, when the possibility occurs in my mind, it should then be labeled temptation. The possibility has occurred. The second I confirm that possibility and say, yes, I am afraid, I am hurt, I am angry, then it is no longer temptation, it is emotion. The thing that emotion is dependent upon is my response. Emotion requires a response. Feeling requires a response. And possibly the most confusing thing for human beings who want to sort out their emotions and do something about it is learning to discern the difference between the temptation and the act itself. The temptation is the presentation of a possibility. The act itself, or the commission of the act, what's the word I want? Perpetration, is responding, reacting to the possibility. I look at a situation and there's an instantaneous, faster than a second, far faster than a second. We're talking about a split of a millisecond here. There is this instantaneous spark that says, I could be jealous. In the next second, if I decide, yes, I am jealous, my muscles will move. The movement of those muscles is faster than you can throw a baseball. And pitchers can throw baseballs at very high velocity. But we're talking about a split-second reaction in the human body, and we're talking about the firing of neurons in the brain. And the switch from temptation to perpetration is so fast that it can't be seen. It's something like the speed of light. What makes the difference? Can I think it out in that period of time? Can I decide to have an emotion or not to have an emotion? Probably not. I cannot decide on the moment. When that temptation is triggered, when that possibility is triggered, I probably cannot process my decision through all of the analysis that my brain is capable of to decide whether I'm going to have an emotion or not. It happens too fast to process it in the moment. Well, if it happens too fast to process it in that second, then am I simply a victim? Do I have to feel everything I feel? Do I have to have all of the emotions that come up? Can I help it? Can I do anything about it? The way that we can do something about it is to set up the programs which produce the results that we want in our life. Because what goes from the temptation or the possibility in one person to the act or perpetration in the next millisecond in one human being will not produce the same result in another human being. Another human being will reject the possibility. Another human being will see the same thing and say, no, I'm not jealous. And he didn't have time to stop and reason out and think, I don't want to be jealous because I see that this would be the result, that would be the result. It's not a matter that they're standing there thinking things through. The difference is that they have wired their circuitry differently before that moment. What that means is that the human who doesn't react with jealousy has decided, I do not want to be a victim of these incidents. They have thought it through at some time. They have made evaluations. This is important, this is not important. This is important but not important enough to have this kind of reaction. There are people, for example, who have been, if we can use this word, sensible enough to say, I'm capable of feeling jealousy, but I do not want to experience a kind of experience that breaks down my muscle tone and destroys my physical body, creates ulcers or cancer or whatever. Therefore, when I see this kind of look, that kind of action, I'm not going to respond with this kind of emotion because it's not worth it. Now, the process that we're talking about is not necessarily one of thinking through all of that. It is a matter of human making judgments and evaluations. This is my set of values. And when my system of values is threatened, I will react. There are basically two categories of human beings. There are self-destructive human beings, which include about 99 9/10% or more of all human beings on earth. These self-destructive human beings are the ones who have given to everybody else the right and the ability, and in their own mind even the responsibility, for whether that individual feels good or bad, whether their health is good or whether it is decaying. They have assigned that responsibility externally to other humans and to their environment. Now that evaluation, whether I'm going to be self-destructive or self-supportive, is generally made by age 3. That basis for our emotional construct is made by the time I'm 3 years old. Now, all of the study about it would suggest that parents have a lot to do with how that judgment is made. But they also suggest that parents cannot actually determine whether that child will be self-destructive or self-supportive. They can't actually determine it, they can influence it. Where a child has a sense of self-importance, and particularly where a child has a sense of responsibility for self, they will build a supportive construct. It's a very, very difficult thing for parents to do, because the very nature of parenting is, I want to believe that I am this important, protective, teaching being with this tiny, helpless thing dependent upon me. And that belief is enormously supportive to parents. Parents exist on it. Now, if I teach that tiny little infant, this helpless little being, that he or she is responsible for their own welfare, their own feelings, I make myself useless. And parents don't like to do that. Parents teach dependency to children. And children have the option of believing that dependency if they want to. And if they don't, what they get is the enormous weight of responsibility for themselves. And most children don't make that decision to feel responsible for their own feelings. They want mommy to decide whether they should or shouldn't. And they grow up wanting mommy to make their decisions and then resenting if she doesn't make the decision that met their appetite at the moment. But even after they become adults, they still spend the rest of their lives wishing for mommy and daddy and asking other people to make decisions that have weight in their own life, which is not wrong. It simply creates vulnerability. What can we do with it? If emotions are triggered in a millisecond, they go from temptation into actual perpetration or experience in a millisecond. How can I change that? The task of life, the task of enlightenment, is a task of rewiring our computers. It is as simple as that. And enlightenment itself is the act of responding to reality as it is without assigning arbitrary meaning. If one responds to the environment as it is, to the reality as it is, without assigning arbitrary meaning, the only emotions and feelings that a person will ever experience are those supportive to the sustenance of life. Only that, nothing more. To feel emotions which are not supportive to life, to survival, is to stimulate the instrument to feel things unnecessarily. And you cannot say that that is bad. I'm not suggesting that it is bad. What I am suggesting is that it has a lot of amplitude, it has a lot of volume. It puts a lot more meaning into life than life has. Now, that can be a choice. And a master can make that choice. An enlightened being can make that choice to respond with a lot more response than is necessary for survival. Responding with more response than is necessary for survival is the opportunity that is given to every creative being, and the blessing is that we can exercise that opportunity. When, on the other hand, when I exercise that opportunity, not at will, but as a victim, it is a totally destructive force, and all in the world it means is that I'm out of control. It doesn't mean that I'm enjoying life. To respond with greater amplitude than necessary is a creative act of living life, if it is deliberate. To respond with greater amplitude than necessary as a victim is the very opposite. It is the destruction of life, it is torture, it is torment, it is the very essence of hell itself. It's what hell is. The difference between them is intent, purpose, meaning, deliberation. What it means is, if I don't assign meanings to things which should not have meaning, if I assign meanings which do not serve me to acts and implications which do not deserve it, then I set myself up to be a victim. And being a victim means more than having your feelings hurt. It can mean loss of property, loss of life, loss of health, loss of opportunity for the freedom of expression. It can mean loss of relationships. That's the difference between positive, enjoyable emotions and destructive, negative emotions. In spite of the fact that we go from temptation to emotion in a split second, there still is the opportunity to be deliberate, to make choices about emotions. What it means is that between the stimuli which produce emotional responses, or to say that another way, between one lesson and another, there is time given. That free time, which we use or waste, in which we just bide our time, that time is available for us to process our system of values. Or, to say it another way, to think about life. That thinking about life and producing evaluations and pictures and images of life, reasons and purpose and philosophy of life, that time is what produces poets, artists, priests, priestesses, magicians, and even kings. What it means is that that free time between the challenges is used to reflect on life, to meditate, and in that meditation and reflection, to assign deliberately new meanings, new shades of meaning, which I impose upon things deliberately because I want them to have those meanings. When I look at a landscape after a rain, I can look at it and take it for granted. I can just take in what is there. And even without any judgments, without any colorations or meanings, it's pleasant. It's pleasant just as it is. When I begin to think, I'm fortunate to see this, the second I think that way, I amplify the pleasure that is available. And that didn't come from outside, that came from a decision inside me. And the interesting thing about that is the first step in magic. The second I think that way, I have begun to give to my environment a power that it did not a second ago have. I've given it more power. Now if I add to that power, increase that power, and multiply that power with my own thoughts, with projecting my consciousness out there into that scenery, I give it an overwhelming power to rejuvenate my body. And what will happen as a result is the electrical currents in my body will be stimulated and I will be healed because of the way that I thought in response to that environment. What happened was I took a door and opened it up. And in one terminology, the free negative ions that were created by the thunderstorm and are available in the atmosphere were welcomed into my system, and I breathed in the prana of life by the way that I thought. I opened doors. I allowed the magic to take place. Now another person sitting right beside me, looking on the same vista, can say, what a hell of a thing to happen. We didn't need rain today. I don't want to rain. Terrible weather. Look at this weather. It gives me arthritis, makes my bones ache. I can't stand this kind of weather. That person is slamming doors shut, depriving himself of the prana of life. And it's not, I don't mean to make it as simple as positive thinking or negative thinking. I am talking more of projecting self into matter and taking what is there, taking advantage of it, process that through my thinking system. The entire body is a thought system, and it extends into the force field around the body, outside the physical perimeter. Now, those little tributaries that reach out from my body into the environment to respond to it are dilated or closed by my attitude toward the environment. We're built that way, and we should be built that way because those little tributaries, those little nerve endings, and not literally nerve endings because they extend beyond the physical body into the aura, but those little feelers, little subtler sensory devices that reach out into my environment are there for the purpose of warning me about the feelings in the environment, the subtler feelings. And they can even warn me about emotions that have taken place in this physical environment in the past. Things have happened here. Negative emotions have been experienced here. Positive emotions have been experienced here. When I go into a sacred place, and there have been sacred acts that have been experienced in that place, and there is a beauty in the energy. When I walk into that place, these nerve endings, these subtler nerve ganglia, if they can be called that, open up and they drink in the sacred energy of the place. And I feel the energy of a hallowed ground. When I walk into a place where some awful thing has happened, those same little sensory devices withdraw and pull up into me and pull away from the environment. And it is through those responses that I experience psychometry. I feel good or I feel bad, responding to the environment around me. Well then, if I dislike being so sensitive to my environment, I can, at some very early stage in life, I can use the force of my will to say to those sensitive little extensions, don't react. I don't want to feel these ups and downs, changes in amplitude with my environment. And so they become coarse, and they become solid, and they become non-reactive, and then I can say, I'm not psychic. I have killed a natural ability of my body to sense what's going on in the environment. Sometimes children, very young children, do that as a response to abuse. Adults are unkind or unloving in the environment, and so the child builds a wall of protection. Now, he not only shuts out the abuse, he shuts out the warmth of the environment and becomes this vessel which has to live selfishly in himself and has to decide, I will feel good, I will not feel good, and I don't want the interaction, I don't want the input of relationships to dictate that. And that becomes a hard, calloused person. That person then gets to use a computerish, left brain, logical, rational mind to deal with the world. And if there are storms and ups and downs of emotion, they all happen inside that shell. And that kind of person is explosive. They can go so long bottling up emotions, and then, unpredictably and for no good reason, those emotions go all over the place simply because the container can't contain them any longer. So we have these several different kinds of people. Some who are ultra-sensitive to their environment. They've got little feelers that creep out from them around every corner and feeling everything. And sometimes they're delighted to experience everything that they experience. Or sometimes these very sensitive people feel pain everywhere they go, because the little feelers that they put out are assigned the job by their own mind of looking for pain everywhere. And that's because they're afraid. So these fearful people who are very sensitive and very psychic only experience warnings and disasters and negative psychic energies around them. And they're great at detecting that. But the problem is they can detect it anywhere, because it's omnipresent. There's always pain on the earth. And people who seek out and sense pain and respond to pain and warn about pain and have their mental preoccupation with pain can always find pain and are always sensitive to it, and tend to be bitching and cranky and sick and griping, and find life a great displeasure. And nobody can say that they're wrong. What they're finding in life, they're finding in life. Sure, it's really there. It really is that painful. It really is that rotten. But that's what you're seeking out. That's what you're finding. And there are people who assign to their sensors that go out from their body, they assign them the job of looking for wonderful things in everything that happens. And they might be completely insensitive to a negative warning. And I can't say that's good either. If I take everything in reality and say that's wonderful, I wouldn't change it, then I'm not going to be an activist, and I'm not going to do something about negative situations, because I'm going to gloss them over as if they weren't there. The master is not the one who pretends that bad is good. The master is not the one who finds bad in everything and must do everything over. The master is the one who experiences all things as they are and allows them to be as they are, knowing that he can take action to change things. He can leave them as they are. He can amplify the experience of them and make them more if he wants to. He can turn off the experience of them and make them less important at will. In short, a master is one who is not a victim, but is making decisions. A master, in fact, is one who has learned to think as quickly as those responses to the environment. We're talking about microseconds, milliseconds. One who takes deliberate actions and is responsible for every emotion. Now, when a thought, a belief, a stimulus pops up as a temptation, we're talking about any instance, either in stimulus of the physical environment or just a thought popping up in the mind. When that pops up as a possibility for experiencing an emotion in the next second, there are several things that can be done. One of the things that people do is give in to the emotion. In other words, every time there is the temptation of the possibility, it turns automatically into perpetration simply because I'm living with whatever comes up, I react to it, and I feel completely helpless to do anything about my emotions or feelings. Very feeling person. That's one possibility. The second possibility is suppression. One of the most important things that we want to get across in this book is the difference between suppression and transmutation or transformation. The difference is this. When there is a possibility for a feeling or an emotion that pops up into my mind, into my consciousness, I can actually experience that emotion in the next second. And after already experiencing the emotion, I can decide I can't afford to feel this way, or I can't afford to let anyone know that I feel this way, and I can suppress it. Then I act differently. I act as if I'm not experiencing the emotion that I'm experiencing. Now, that can be a useful thing. It's not wrong. What it means is this. If the possibility of an emotion or a feeling pops up, and I react to it in the next second, I take some action. Now, the action that I take may be as simple as the moving of a couple of muscles around my mouth or around my eyes. I have the tiniest little facial expression. Or the muscles in my shoulders go up just slightly, or come in slightly, or go back or out between the temptation and the actual emotion.
A lot of energy.
And it goes fast. I want to say here that my belief is that the only thing that prevents us from thinking that fast is the rational belief that it's probably not possible. Most people believe that it's not possible to think that fast, therefore they don't think that fast. So I'm not suggesting that it's impossible to think so fast that you can resist the temptation before actually emoting. That split second between is possible to stop the reaction and to make a different choice. But it's not possible unless you take the whole of life and process it and look at your value system and be deliberate about what you're feeling. Once you have gained and accepted and acted on a belief that you are in charge of how you feel at all times, under all circumstances, that you are constantly responsible for it, and you don't want to not be responsible for it, that belief system is building a wiring that is so fast that you will take responsibility for every discharge of energy which would have produced emotions. But now you are acting deliberately on those emotions, and you'll have an emotion if you want to, and not have it when you don't want to. That is actually possible for a human to do. That takes a dynamic responsibility that most people don't even want, let alone consider possible. When an emotion comes up and I make the slightest muscle change, the slightest, that muscle change reinforces the all-rightness of the emotion. And what that means is the next time that temptation comes, the emotion, the muscle change, will happen more quickly and more definitely, simply because I accepted it once. If I accept an emotion one time, it is reinforced as a pattern for acceptance for next time. And if I experience it the third time, I make myself less helpless against that emotion. Every time I react, the reaction, what that says is that action emphasizes or supports stimulus. There are two theories that have come up in the past. One says that action follows thought, and that is an old psychological model. Action follows thought. If you think, then you act. A newer psychological thought is that thought follows action. Thought follows action idea means that if I make a face, if I say use my muscles of expression to look as if I'm experiencing fear, the thought of fear will come into my mind. That's the process of thought follows action. That thought follows action idea is used most frequently, perhaps, by actors of a system called method acting. That if I study the body posture and the facial expression of a particular emotion, and if I mimic that posture and expression, I will actually feel the emotion. For that reason, actors on stage cannot just pretend to feel emotions. They actually feel emotions, and they project emotions, and they become what is called believable actors. A believable actor is an actor that is so much into the role that they are projecting the psychic energy of the thoughts and the emotions of the role. It looks like magic, and quite frankly, it is magic at its height. It is occultism. They take the emotions of the audience and they carry the emotions of the audience through the actions that they are portraying on the stage. That is real sorcery. And it can move a group of people into battle. It can produce a plague. It can produce an epidemic. It can produce a stock market crash. It can do amazing things to the human psyche because these are people who are taking the energy of life and they are amplifying it through particular modes of expression that they are creating with their muscles, with the physical body and the instruments around it. Not just with the muscles, but the muscles are the fiber through which this energy is pushed to reach out into the audience and cause a sympathetic response. So the point we're making here is that the split second that you react to an emotion, you reinforce that emotion is appropriate to that circumstance. You reinforce your belief and you make it harder to respond differently in the future. Every time you react with anger, you make it harder not to react with anger under a similar circumstance in the future. Actually, what we're talking about here is moving ourselves from a victim space into an observer space. But the next step for the observer is the director, the producer, the production of new emotional responses. And I think what you're getting at is if a person tries to force a different action on his face, when I feel myself experiencing an emotion, I say, no, I don't want to feel this, I can try to make my face like a mask. I can try to force my body to respond differently. Even though I'm feeling one way, I pretend to feel another. That's the suppression of emotion. The difference between suppression and transformation is the effectiveness of a decision. And what that means is this. If I decide to feel differently, but do not convince myself to actually feel differently, I will suppress. It is a decision half made. It is a decision made without conviction. If, on the other hand, I change an emotional response to a very different one and affirm that I do want to feel that different way, if I complete that, if it's a complete decision, it is not suppression, it is transformation. The difference is in the completeness of the decision or in the wholeness of the decision. If I am one with my decision, if I really believe it, if I really want it, if I believe, for example, I'm acting the way I'm acting because I'm supposed to, and the sense of that, or belief about that is, that's imposed upon me from without. I am acting this way because it's proper. Then it is not my decision, it is not whole, and I am suppressing. Now, emotions and feelings, ideas and beliefs that are suppressed in that way have to come out at some time in some place. They are the stuff that ulcers are made from, cancer is made from, mental breakdowns, emotional breakdowns, mental illness. All of these things are made from these suppressed emotions. But the fact that I got angry and didn't act angry does not necessarily mean that I suppressed. It may mean that I transformed. Transformation means that I saw from an observer space that the reaction that I was having is not serving me and what I want out of my life, what I want out of that situation. There is another kind of response that serves me, that I feel good with, that meets all my criteria for responding to this situation. When I can see myself in that new response, when I can project that new response, and when I can feel good with my new response, it feels complete and whole, then I experience transformation instead of suppression. There are two ways of responding to emotion, to what I'm calling the temptation or the catalyst for emotion. One of them is to process every emotion and every feeling individually. Every time I have a stimulus coming up, a thought or whatever that could lead to an emotion, I think about it, I either cancel it out, I act on it, I amplify it, I suppress it, I do something with it, I experience it, I express it. And just to throw this in, there's a more recent psychology model that says every time an emotion comes up, you must experience it, you must express it, otherwise it's suppressed. And you know, we like to simplify things. We like to get things down to on and off, right, wrong, good, bad. And that attitude of trying to make everything so binary simple, just two modes, you either do or you don't, has produced a generation of people who think that you have to act on anger in order to, quote, get it out. And that whole school of psychology doesn't even think about, what about not putting it in there? You don't have to get it out if you don't put it in there. And what that means is, if we have anger reactions to situations, it is because we have put the seeds of anger into our belief system about that situation. We have to first believe that it is appropriate to respond with anger, or we cannot respond with anger to any stimuli. And if we do not have a belief that anger is an appropriate response, we will not experience anger when that stimulus comes up. Just to use a very simple illustration, if somebody calls me a son of a bitch, and I think that son of a bitch means ice cream, I'm not going to be insulted. I'm not going to respond with anger because I don't know what it means. If, on the other hand, I have been taught son of a bitch is the worst thing that anybody can ever call you because that has implications about your mother. And, you know, I might not even react for myself. You know, I can handle it, let him call me anything. But he called my mother a bitch. And I've got to defend her honor. And so all this emotion comes rising up, and I'm going to strangle somebody. I'm going to kill them because they pushed air through their vocal cords and formed this sound, which I think somehow impugns my mother's chastity. It is insanely ridiculous, obviously. But because we assign meaning to that particular sound and to the facial expression that he was wearing and the difference in, you know, if somebody's a good buddy, he can call me all kinds of son of bitches and bastards, and I know that he doesn't really mean it and he's going to be over it in a minute, and so I let it slide. But let some other guy that I don't like, that has a different energy about it, say the same thing, and I want to kill him. If we don't have the belief system that says you are supposed to, or it is all right to, or you can't help responding this way in this particular time, or even more, what you were bringing up, if you see that a child is hurt or a dog is killed, something that you consider to be, quote, injustice in the world, there is something that you think is horrible, a drought, a famine in India, the tidal wave. You know what we have locked into that? We have this belief, if you're a nice person, You're supposed to say, oh, isn't that terrible? And as a matter of fact, if you're a loving person, you will actually suffer because it happened. You are responsible to. You're supposed to. That's what nice people do. I have an obligation to suffer when there is suffering in the world. How much sense does that make? What that means is that through my personal magic, I created two sufferings where there was one. Isn't that wonderful? That's what magic is all about. We get to run around creating more suffering and telling each other that we are obligated to suffer because a dog got killed in the road. Isn't it terrible? This is a terrible world. God must be awful that he would let such a thing happen. We actually have these mechanisms, these belief systems set up inside us that we don't think about. We don't think, well, why am I obligated to feel sad for the suffering of a child? Is that appropriate? Does that alleviate the child's suffering? Well, jump to the binary. What if nobody cared when a child suffers? Nobody would ever do anything. The binary is not appropriate. I don't have to jump from I suffer too to I don't care at all. I can look at the child's suffering. I can care. I can refuse to feel hurt, pain, injustice. I can look to see what can be done, if anything. And I can be powerful enough and joyous enough and healthy enough and creative enough to set different circumstances in motion if that's within my power. And if not, I can recognize life is greater than that suffering, and life has endured all these centuries of suffering and still grows. The miracle of life coming out of the dung heap still happens, and there's beauty in this moment. Recognizing the fact that every decision, every emotion, every feeling, every thought that I will ever have, every stimulus that I will ever experience, is an expression of either love or fear. Every single thought, action, stimulus, motivation, emotion, every feeling. If I have as the very basis of my belief system, if I believe that fear protects me, and unfortunately that's what most people believe, it's the overwhelming choice. If I believe that fear is necessary, it's essential, that if I have enough of it, I will act properly, I'll behave properly, I'll get the things that I need. If I believe in fear as a power to provide for life, then I will believe in that, and my actions and motivations and emotions will be dictated by that, and that's called making fear Lord of my life. It's the ruler. It rules over my actions, and my actions are a response to my worshiping fear. If I learn that love, on the other hand, love being support of life, I support life as it is. I support life being what it is. I support myself as I am, which means I no longer wish that I were different than I am. I support who I am and what I am. If I will give myself love as a life support system and believe in that, I really believe that that can support who I am and what I am and fulfill me, then I make a switch of allegiance from fear to love.